Hi, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Indian Public Policy Network annual conference and welcome to the post-lunch session of the first day. We had a lot of interesting sessions that we saw in the first half today, including the keynote addresses, the panel discussions, and a range of other interesting things. The theme for this year's conference is technology and policy. And in India, rural population is a huge one. And I think bringing the discussion back to rural India is very pertinent for any policy making purposes. Recently, a new term has evolved, and many of you might have heard that term, weird users, which means Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. So most of the IT technologies, everything, like whether you talk of desktop access, mobile access, and everything, are been designed for the weird users, which are, as I told you, Western educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic countries, and those citizens. If you are looking at someone in rural India who doesn't understand English, is not that savvy to even interact on our smartphones, we cannot possibly apply the same technologies for them, and we'll have to make amendments so that we can reach to that level. And I am hoping that this panel will give us some interesting insights in that aspect. I'm really happy that this panel has all the experts in that field. So we are joined by Mr. Osama Manzar. He's the founder and director of Digital Empowerment Foundation. He's in a rural location now. So he will speak, as you can see him, but possibly he might not be able to moderate. So I will request Mr. Sanjeev Pansalkar, who is the director at Vikash Anvesh Foundation, to help us with the moderation of this panel. We are also joined by Mr. Amol Gaikwad. He is a medical director for Better Education, Lifestyle and Environment Foundation. Mr. Harish Hande, co-founder of Selco. Dr. Purnima Dore, head of the data-driven governance at Tata Trust. And last but not the least, Mr. Shiva Muthuprakash. He's a researcher at the Vikash Anvesh Foundation. So I will hand over the session to Mr. Sanjeev. Sir, it's all yours.
Thank you. Am I audible? Yeah. Hello. Am I audible?
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this session on how technology and policy becomes relevant and how does one look at that through the eye of the rural India. This session, as was being pointed out earlier, was to be moderated by Osama ji, but Osama happens to be located at the moment in a fairly remote place, and he has suggested that I do it. So let me try it to the best of my abilities. And what we intend to do is to first provide you the kind of examples of how technology has been used for the benefit of the rural people. And we are not going to use the word technology only in the sense of digital or information technology, but we certainly will try and of course, that will be a major part of the discussion, but there will also be some other kind of technologies that we will be talking about. So we have with us Purnima, who has been running digital data-driven governance, and I would like to begin with her. Now we have got an hour with us, so maybe, and 5 people, so maybe it will, if we spend each speaker takes about 7 or 8 minutes, and then we'll have some time for discussions and so on. So maybe Purnima, you can begin.
Yes, good afternoon. It's a privilege to be on this panel, particularly moderated by Professor Pansalkar, having worked and learned so much from him. And a lot of the work that we've initiated around, how data can work in rural areas has been under his aegis as well. I'll give a bit of a background about, how some of the lens with which I will do some of the sharing is this, that while a lot of programs look specifically at issues around health, education, environment, even if they are targeting rural communities. One thing which we've been realizing over time is that the dearth of information to be able to take better decisions, and the nature in which planning happens, where it has been allocations which come to the panchayat or to the district, as opposed to the bottom up approaches, which through participatory planning there have been efforts to propagate those. And what role can the new technology that has emerged in the last 5 to 10 years play to bridge that? Because what we see in terms of system deficiencies are often also governed by the fact that a district collector or a block officer does not have those tools, with him or her to be able to triangulate the information, to be able to make sense of, which villages, which communities do I need to prioritize the most. They have so many things on their platter. And so from a decision-making standpoint, as a leader, for a district collector or for some of these stakeholders, it's critical to see how information can, be used as an aid. So towards that, I think we've looked at this through, 2-3 pathways. One is, how does one use the micro planning processes or the participatory planning tools and layer data and technology elements into that? What we have tried to do is to collect information, therefore, at scale. So conduct household surveys, triangulate that with facility level information of your Anganwadi, school, and the health system as 3 important institutions. Supplement that with for focus group discussions and some of those tools, together with tablet-based or mobile app-based data collection. So that has meant training a lot of people on the ground to collect information, to understand how some of these tools work. And it's been an interesting journey where we started with in Andhra Pradesh, expanded this in Maharashtra, looked at specific districts or focused blocks where that information could get captured and scale, and develop use cases for the district collector, that if this kind of information is available to you, does it make it easier to plan that these are villages? You then are able to collect information, have it visualized on a dashboard or with similar kinds of tools to aggregate what the VDP actually is looking like if there is this kind of information that comes up from the field. We've then tried to bring it up that, okay, if this is what the village development plan looks like, can we also look at scheme level information? So bringing in the various schemes, their eligibility criteria, mapping that with this data into the back end, to then throw up that in this village, say so many households that are eligible under PMAY have not received it yet, or so many households that could have been reached by the Janani Suraksha Yojana still seem to have got missed out. It could be an issue of awareness, it could be an issue of outreach, but these tools have therefore helped us to triangulate that. And in Chandrapur, Balasore, some of these districts, a lot of intensive work has been possible with the administration to use this information in the Gram Sabhas, so that that political process also gets informed with such tools, and B, look at allocations that can come in. So we do have substantial now documented evidence also that with these kind of tools, a large number of beneficiaries are, sorry, I shouldn't use the word beneficiaries, I'm trying to stop using it myself and getting other people to stop. So to what extent does the community be able to have better access if this kind of information is available, both to the administrators and to the decision makers, which include their Gram Panchayat representatives? If I had to, extrapolate that a little further, these tools, we then thought that it makes sense to, codify them, because it's okay to do it in a few places, but if we want people to think about this at scale, so we've codified it into a framework called Delta, which is data evaluation, learning, technology, and analysis. And by Delta, we also want to signify an incremental change, which is the calculus version of Delta, that if something changes, then something else kind of kicks in. And so in this process, what we've found is that once this has worked in a few places, Maharashtra government picked up this kind of approach under their village social transformation mission. The Niti Aayog approached us to help them with some elements of this as part of the aspirational districts program. we've also had work with other agencies or teams to see how the Gram Panchayat development plan, the GPDP, can incorporate some of these tools and methods so that that process becomes more robust. We've also looked at players like UNDP, World Bank, where the SDG story is going on, and they are looking to localize SDGs at a unit level. So some of these tools, which we have now looked at both from an app point of view and also from a process point of view, we're now looking at how do you build in SDGs into the back end to be able to make participatory planning a bigger story. And I'll conclude with the fact that 2-3 key learnings here. One is that there is immense potential if we go the digital census route, because that then means in one go we get a lot of information at a unit level, which helps for planning. But that has to go with the corollary of very strong data protection, data standards of what can be aggregated, what can be available at the individual level, because I think there are a lot of concerns there, and so strong policy action on that front is essential. And the third thing which I think we've learned is that capacity building of people right from ground up. Where we've trained volunteers on the ground, we've found that people are very receptive to new technology. They need a little bit of handholding, but they can be very, very good change agents, on the ground, because once they understand schemes, they understand that information, how the panchayat works, their ability to bat goes, much higher. But also with the administration, there needs to be a lot of capacity building if such digital tools need to be used for better policy. So I'll stop there and come in on later questions.
Thank you, Purnima, both for giving a very pithy presentation and as well as to sticking to time. I will now move to Harish. Harish is a Magsaysay Award winner and has been a pioneer in bringing the technology of solar energy into the villages. For long years, he was focusing essentially on solar energy-based lighting, but now he has become the messiah of the rural livelihood sector and has been applying solar energy-based platforms for promoting rural livelihoods. There is a great deal to learn from Harish. Over to you, Harish.
Thank you, Sanjeev sir. As Purnima said, it's an honor because आपके साथ तो बहुत सालों से हमने technology के इसमें we have worked together and it's wonderful to speak on like-minded people. I'll just start with 2 examples, which actually shows where the divide is. It's actually not the technology divide; it's the thinking divide. We were doing a work with 2 or 3 blacksmiths regarding new technologies that could be used for blacksmithy in terms of hammering as well as for the blacksmith blower. So we basically hired them as experts and developed a model. But a problem we got stuck was in our audit. And when a third-party audit happened, and one of the big 4s did an audit, the whole question for 2 days was, how do you consider a blacksmith actually as an expert? And they rejected it, basically saying कि उसके पास तो degree नहीं है, now where is he qualified? How can he actually define a blacksmith as an expert? Now, if that thinking divide has come in place, saying that that only we will, the weird, as Avik said, are the people who, so what have we replaced? Everything by the British colonialism with the weird people, right? Oh, thinking bhi karenge. So how do we redefine, Sanjeev sir, in the concept of expertise? And how do we define expert? Until the civil society and the technology players do not redefine, saying that experts are not only who are from an education qualification, but how do we bring in experience? I mean, we can't go to Narayan Murthy and today say, "Ki boss, you software mein hum kuch sikhayenge aapko." Same thing, how can we have the arrogance to go to a blacksmith blower and say, "We're going to define you"? So I guess he's the equivalent of Narayan Murthy, or she is the equivalent of Narayan Murthy in the blacksmithy area. How do we? In the second, we also did a small workshop. We do this regularly in the vernacular language, and we had this we had a panel on blacksmithy and we had a panel on agri-farmers. I'll tell an example of blacksmithy. So we had four blacksmiths on a panel. 2 were below 40 and 2 were above 60. The people above 60 basically said, huh, a blacksmith blower is great. It's okay, and I can run with it, and this technology will change my life. The below 40 people were very clear, saying that as we see the trend of farming becoming little, the sickles that are used are no longer going to be used, and we see larger equipment that are needed when people come to us. And 4 to 5 years down the line, with the mass scale sickles, we will not be the people that people come to for making a sickle. So we need to upgrade the type of tools that people would need for 2 to 3 acre land. So they had already perceived what's going to happen 3 to 3.5, 5 years down the line. So any technology that the civil society who's working in the rural areas is able to also judge whether it's generational or not. Sometimes when we look at the trickle down effect of technology that people speak about, the one that is used by the upper middle class, and that is trickles down, it's like typewriter ne bhej diya, and then slowly it comes, and we modify a typewriter and give it to the rural areas, where 5 years down the line, that same technology might be a technology burden on the poor, which should have left it to not to be entrepreneurial, creating jobs, the futuristic. It's always dependent on the upper financial sector, upper society of the financial society, which is that the technology will be developed by them. I think we need to rethink. And my point is, there are enormous options in a country like India with the diversity, that technology can play a role with agriculture, in the agriculture, multiple value chains, animal husbandry. Each value chain, say rice, has around 60 nodal points where technology can actually be created, made, innovated, and that could actually be run by sustainable energy. Silk value chains in the animal husbandry, the poultry value chains, in the milking value chain, from milking the cow to a chiller to a khoya making. Everywhere there is a potential for technology to not only increase, number one, the what you call it as the livelihoods of the people, of the 40% to 50% of our population, reduce drudgery, so that, and the third, very, very critical, is that neutralizes gender. Many of the livelihoods that we today talk about, the tools are made very male centric, whether it's a rice huller, which if you look at a rice huller which runs by a diesel, many of time you need a man, not even a man, a very strong man to even start the diesel generator to actually run the rice mill. Today, a good rice huller can actually be switched by a simple electric switch, can actually run a rice huller. Or pottery makers, a solar power pottery maker democratizes from a gender perspective. Hammer mills, which are needed by the blacksmiths to do bigger equipment, can actually be a high efficient energy which runs on solar. Again, makes it that we have now a lot of women blacksmiths who actually are become part of the whole blacksmith livelihood chain. So it's not just technology per se going to the rural areas. How do we make it a human-centric design where we use the people are using it as experts to be part of the innovation, become partners, and then create a revolution in a country like ours, which becomes a hotbed of that technology, not IT, for rest of the world. And that's, I think, a key to what we need to look at. Thank you, Sanjeev.
Thank you. This is really an eye-opening presentation from Harish. I think completely new points which he has made, and I hope it brings us out of the box of thinking of technology only as IT and thinking of technology only as new ways of doing it and new gadgets and new tools and so on and so forth. Osama ji, would you like to make any comment on these two presentations which have happened till now? Osama?
Yeah, after hi Harish, how are you? So I was thinking what Harish said. I will replace all the technology thing that he talked about to be by IT, and then everything is the same for me. Okay. Grassroots innovation and democratization of innovation and making everybody not treat like whether you are qualified to do anything or not. I will say all those things. But just trying to bring one perspective is that India is a huge country, and whether it's a technological intervention in our life or innovation intervention in our life, we cannot really treat these things top down. We have to treat how we can create what we call otherwise a scale. Scale should not be treated as कि IIT में कुछ बना and then उसी को हम हर जगह deploy कर देंगे, या प्लानिंग कमीशन ने कुछ बोला उसी को डिप्लॉय कर देंगे, या डेटा ड्रिवन कंट्री चलानी है तो सबको यही सर्वर खरीदना पड़ेगा, यही मोबाइल खरीदना पड़ेगा एंड थिंग्स लाइक दैट. We cannot do that. We need to actually see how we can actually create a scale of approach and thought process and what you want to achieve. I mean, for example, for the last 20 years, we have been working in Digital Empowerment Foundation. We say that we are not digital, we are only empowerment foundation. Digital is an inclusion from the perspective of the requirement of the people to make their life efficient and how you can use it. We are not going to thopod, digital in the life of the people. If the telephone can solve the problem and make life better, so be it. If an iMac can solve the problem, just because it's an iMac, that doesn't mean that it will solve all the problem. Or just because you get 150 Mbps Geo-Fi, that doesn't mean you will have all the solution of your life. So it's very, very important that we look at this entire approach from that perspective. But I want to just stop there, because you said that to comment only on these couple of presentations.
Right.
I would like to come back and
Sure.
say a part of mine, which I would like to contribute.
Certainly. Let's talk about health for a while, and I will request Dr. Amol to speak about how digital or other technologies in health have relevance in rural areas, and how does one look at them in the context of rural people. Dr. Amol Gaikwad, please.
Sure. Thank you, sir. So like both the previous speaker, I'm also thankful to be part of this panel discussion because I'm sharing the panel with Dr. Pansalkar, sir. Yeah. So to be very frank, when we started our telemedicine intervention, before that, I was very skeptical that in rural community, how it can be acceptable. Because in rural community, there is always that they see a doctor, whether it's a qualified or it doesn't matter, but they see that they have the touch. And then doctor consult him or her, give medicine and patient goes. But here we have to try that there is one doctor sitting somewhere 30-40 kilometers away from the village, and the patient will interact with him on a screen, and then he or she will accept that doctor. So that was our biggest constraint to start with, but we feel that we'll start the intervention. Just to give a background, we worked with the Tata Trust at least 2 years back, and Tata Telecommunication, which provides the telemedicine platform, and one partner, Ramakrishna Mission. So we all three together came and see what we can do together so that the primary care, the basic primary care, can be reached to a village level. Because in UP, if you see, there's a huge population density. One PhD is for 50,000 population, and if you see the subcenter stage or the PSC, there is the doctor is not available. If doctor is available, then the medicine is not available. So we three come together and say, yes, what we can do to provide accessible and quality healthcare. We come with a design that yes, we can provide a good primary healthcare using the technology, the telemedicine, and we identified the vendor for the telemedicine platform, the Tata Communication, and then we started. To start with, we thought that how we should reach, because and what is our limitation, because so technology on distance we cannot treat each and every case. What should be our limitation to address this healthcare access? So we come to one finalized decision that yes, we will do only the primary care. We will not do any emergency care, because emergencies, it's very difficult to manage. So we have to refer them to the nearest tertiary care hospital. And yes, we should focus on the management of and the maintenance of the diabetes and hypertension cases, because if we detect them early, it is very easy to manage them distantly. And if they are in proper maintenance, we can say that we can decrease their morbidity and mortality in that cases. So this was the main intention to start. And for that, we have set up a 9 telemedicine centers in the 9 blocks of Mathura. We excluded the Mathura block because it has enough healthcare infrastructure, public and private both. But the rest of 9 blocks, we identified the places where in 5 kilometers of that place there is no healthcare provider, whether it's the private or the government. And we appointed a nurse in each of the telemedicine center. We trained them on how to connect on the television platform, what are the basic examination that nurse has to do, and say how the prescription will come to you, and how she can dispense the medicine, and how she has to do the follow-up. So all these things, vigorous 2 months of training happened with the nurses. And I remember the date that on 4th March we started, 4th March 2017, we started the telemedicine activity in the all our 9 centers. Initially response was too huge. So like on the day, first 5 days, there were around 100 of patients coming. So because the awareness which we gave that just you will you will get a medicine, you can see the doctor. But after 5 days, the response is going down. We saw that what happens with this, that response is going down, that because of the waiting, the platform, say it's a good technology that we are consulting the patient through distance, but you are not able to give the platform is not able to support the need which came, which we have not expected. So how can we link this patient? How can we give the enough spacing to the patient and in different places? So accordingly, we work on the platform, and say in a 2 months of time, we are able to rectify that problem in the platform. And then again, we were able to consult 30 to 40 patients per center per day. So this was our average. In any day, any months, we are able to get say 30 to 40 patients in each center, with majorly on the diabetes and hypertension. And with this kind of the telemedicine platform, we in 2 years of time, we were able to consult 2 lakhs of consultation. We have screened more than 50,000 of individual for the diabetes and hypertension. And 3,500 cases we identified, newly diagnosed diabetes and hypertension, and they were constantly coming to us for the maintenance, so that they will not have any high BP or low BP or high sugar. So that we were successfully treating these 3,500 cases. The key role in this treatment was our local healthcare worker. We have appointed one Asha kind of person. We called it as a healthcare staff or healthcare staff. She used to go to the village of house of each diagnosed patient, so that to see whether they have any complication, whether they are taking medicine properly or not. And simultaneously, on the day of their consult, she used to accompany them and get consultation done. So overall, yes, for the creating access, telemedicine is a good technology with certain limitations, because we have to rely on the internet connectivity, electricity. Yeah, electricity backup can be given, but internet connectivity is a big challenge which we face. But thankful to the Tata Communication, they have provided around 99% of flawless connectivity to us. Again, some point of care devices which we use in this project, like HbA1c, glucometer, and digital BP apparatus. Everyone uses it in every house. But yes, we identified one technology which is giving us the HbA1c result on the spot, so that we are able to diagnose diabetic cases in faster way. So the innovations and the technology definitely will help in rural India if it used properly and to a certain limit. So we have to see the what are the limits of the technology, and definitely primary care can be given by the technology across India. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Amol. Wonderful. I mean, this is kind of a pioneering effort for taking health where the medical staff is short and where the requirement is so large. I think it provided very good result, and I hope it is being replicated elsewhere. Shiva, can we have you talk about agriculture and how technology has been applied there in Shiva?
Yeah, yes, thank you. So I think, I mean, it's very much a honor, and I think everyone has been mentioning about Sanjay sir, and currently I'm his student, so I'm working with him. So thanks for the opportunity. So I'd like to pick up a couple of things from Osama ji and Harish. So basically, they were mentioning about this people-centric technology. So that's where probably I think the critical piece is lying. Just to pick up an example, because more to speak about the sustainable agricultural practice, more about the farming practice per se. So we had we conducted a research last year on why sustainable agricultural practices so acclaimed, and when we go to a farmer who's practicing some agroecological farming, he celebrates it, but then the neighboring farmer is not really picking up such practices. So I mean, we try to understand the challenges or the barriers which is stopping the neighboring farmers to adopt it. So one of the key things we could understand is basically the interpretation of technology or the transfer of the knowledge by itself is a constraint. So that's where I was talking about this people-centric technology which Harish was mentioning. So just to give an example of this composting, probably everyone is aware of composting. So when we go to the field and we ask the farmers, like, do you do composting? Everyone says that, I mean, 90% of them, they have a notion of what's meant by composting. And it's such a, I mean, a wonderful technology to sort of compost, I mean, convert the normal biomass into much more usable and available nutrient content to the plants. So most of them say that they do practice it, but when you actually understand what they are doing, it's nowhere near composting. So that's how the technology is sort of transferred, or the knowledge is getting transferred. And I mean, probably that particular gap needs to be filled, so that I mean, we need to design whatever technology we are giving or the knowledge we are transferring to the people. Especially, I'm talking in terms of farming and farming practices. So we need to have the people in mind and how they sort of going to capture it and how they're going to pick up what we are telling them. I mean, sort of not we, in the sense like the knowledge system is being developed and how it is being transferred. So that's the critical part, and I would really get on. I mean, add that particular part, and then get into the second part of the scaling up aspect. Osama ji was mentioning about the scaling up aspects. So when it comes to farming technology, I think now in the last 1 decade at least, we are moving out of this technology-driven or the technology-centric, transfer of technology to the farmers. Now the entire sector is sort of talking about innovation pathways and more about the entire fabric of socioeconomic and institutional aspect of how a technology could be transferred to the farmers. So that's where probably we are supposed to sort of move towards. And I think since morning, I think there have been a lot of panels where we have always been saying about this confusion of this the digital technology with that of hard technologies. I guess everywhere I think it's equally important, but when it comes to the rural part, I think, and farming, it's so critical that we may have soft technologies which is going to play a bigger role in the future. But then we need to have the hard technologies in place. Hard technologies, I mean, technologies for production. For example, like as I mentioned about this composting or seed vending machine or whatever. I mean, any technologies per se, the hard technologies needs to be in place. Especially, I think two contexts probably is much more critical when we talk of farming and rural areas. One is about the climate change. So we need to bring in more of climate resilient technologies. So that's the one part. And second is about the water. I think the water is going to be the critical space where farming as well as the rural area is going to face in the future. So I think water conservation technologies and such things, I think that's the hard systems I would think. And coming to the soft systems, where I think that the knowledge system comes into place, which is going to be very critical. In our study last year, we had conducted the study in 11 states, and out of that, you have a very clear divide between the eastern states and the western states or southern states per se. So in the eastern states, maybe the western states, it's more about the knowledge systems and the access to, for example, YouTube. Now, though, many YouTube channels are available where farmers are able to sort of access to some new practices. Such things are easily accessible for the Western farmers and usually a little bit of larger farmers. But when it comes to the Eastern states, the knowledge system or the access to the knowledge, especially Jharkhand, Odisha, it's so limited. And the constraint of access to that knowledge system itself is very limited. Now we talk a lot of this ICT. So where is it reaching and who is it reaching? I think Sanjay sir will be talking a bit on that, the digital inclusion part. We talk of this ICT, but then it requires the Android phone initially. And how much of people have access to that itself is a question. And again, if you have it, how much are going to use it for such thing and how much of them are more into the videos and WhatsApping. So that part is there, but anyway, so that's a completely a different thing. But coming to that, I think that particular ICT thing, that's going to play a bigger role. And I think we need to give it the dimension of the institutions. So we've been talking of the technology for individuals. I think we need to talk technology for institutions. So, we talk of, the data is going to be the major thing for market and supply chain and everything. I think hard systems needs to be put in place in the supply chain to make sure that farmers realize the better price. And now we talk a lot of FPOs. Whatever market problems we have, because farmers, small and marginal farmers are not able to realize the good price. So we talk of FPOs. So, and I think, as you know that so many FPOs are getting created, but then the existing FPOs itself is struggling. And there is a missing piece. What is the value addition the FPO is making? And I guess there is some answer lies into this data-driven supply chain and the FPOs. And if the FPOs could sort of bring in this value of data along with the hard systems in place, I think the farmers also will benefit. And that's where I was saying that we need to have so we in India, at least currently, we are talking about the privacy of the data, and we don't have any law though, officially. I think we need to move towards the ownership of the data. And I see so many Android platforms are coming for connecting the farm inputs as well as the output supply chain. I think there is a lot of data behind this and a lot of different intentions behind this. We need to really mobilize and talk about the ownership of this data and how we sort of make this individual-centric data into a community-centric data. If I'm just going to have a problem with the data, giving my data to a third party, it may not have, if I'm even withdrawing the data, it doesn't make much difference to the company or the third party. But if we say that the ownership of this data is with the community, let's say the FPO is having this ownership of this data, then I think the voice of the farmers and the voice of this, the stake of the farmers in creating this data itself, as well as their value in the supply chain will sort of increase. And I think these are many aspects probably I would like to sort of touch upon when it comes to farming and technology, especially with respect to rural. And I guess we need to have a sort of a, like I said, for the scaling up aspect. So we need to move towards more of, innovation and design based on, design-based scaling up of technology and taking the technology to the farmers. So that's a few things I would want to touch. Sir, I'll leave it here. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiva. So far, many interesting points have been made. What I'm going to do is to relate this to the original thought of the government of India of creating India as a digitally empowered society and a knowledge economy. And let's see how one can weave these things together and to try and figure out a pathway towards making our country a digitally empowered society and a knowledge economy. The digitally empowered society is a very, how shall I say, very ambitious term. To me, empowerment includes, and I would like Osama to subsequently comment on what I'm saying. To me, empowerment, digital empowerment basically means digital inclusion plus agency of the people. People have to have the agency to use that digital ability to do what they want to do. So, where are they? What is the status now? We had done research a couple of years back about in 7 or 8 states of this country, including some of the eastern states like Assam and Bengal and Orissa and all these, to figure out what is the level of digital empowerment, what is the level of digital inclusion among the people. What we discovered is not really shocking. What we discovered is obvious. Women are lagging behind. That the Dalit and people like that, the underprivileged people with less assets are lagging behind. They don't even have an access to a smartphone. Women typically have this old style keyboard wala telephone on which, G2, what do you call the second generation telephone you can only operate. They can't have any smartphone. So those are the issues. But those who have smartphones also were accessing network, but essentially to play YouTube songs and do WhatsApp and Facebook, not even Facebook, just WhatsApp messaging. So people had got digital access because the network is available almost everywhere, and there is enough power thanks to Harish and many people in the solar regime to provide at least charging facilities using the solar energy. So the telephone equipments can be charged, and there's a network available, so people can access the internet. But it is being used for something. So people have got the access. They also have got the taste. That's the second stage. You have to have an access. You have to have a taste to use. But the navigation comfort was very, very limited. Navigation comfort was very limited among people. The majority, large majority of the people whom who were surveyed said that they had never accessed any website whatsoever on their own. They always needed to be aided, goaded, coached, handheld, monitor, to access a particular website. In fact, the number of people who had email account itself was very small proportion of the total sample. So people could not voluntarily on their own navigate the web very well, and therefore the whole ability of searching the web for the appropriate information, etc., was a problem. The most, and I'm ashamed that this was a problem 70 years after the independence. The most important problem which people faced was the language problem. And I used to, after this research was done, I used to offer this as an open offer to people. Now I'll not, because maybe Bheem and other packages have come. My offer used to be here. Please send me 1,000 rupees. I'll send you 3,000 rupees within 2 days. Only on one condition, that you will not send me the money using English language. This is what I used to say 3 years back. Now, of course, you can do it because of, you're the, as I said, the UPI and all that kind of thing. But 3 years back, nothing of this kind happened. And the only way to transact on the network was through the English language. So it was a digital world which was behind the English walls. And that was after 70 years. So what I used to call this was a perverse, it was a perverse colonial snobbery that prevented people from using digital technology in this country. And that continues, even if, in fact, one of my colleagues had done this research, and we visited hundreds of websites, about 80 or 90 of them in the public systems, providing services to people like insurance and banking and transport and reservations and things like that. Out of them, maybe 3 or 4 offered services in any language other than English. So we apparently, almost deliberately as it were, conspirationally as it were, are keeping people out of the access to what can be the modern world of digital information technology enabled services. So that is something that needs to be removed very quickly. When I mentioned this, people said, oh, Google is coming with translation and so on and so forth. Now a joke is going around right now that Google translation of the word unworried is avivahit. So you know what the pace at which the translations are happening is pretty slow even now. So just relying on a company to provide translation service so that people can access the ITES better, I think is too bold and a very naive belief. So we need to, at the policy level, we need to insist that these services are available in vernacular, if not all vernacular, at least the English, Hindi, and one regional language. So that can be the compulsion that has to be made to all people, so that at least the reach will increase, and then people will start moving from digital taste to digital navigation, navigation on the technology, and then thereafter, then people will search. People have enough ability to, agencies certainly would make them try and search and so on and so forth. As it is, we know that those who have the agency, those who have the drive, will contact 10, 20, 30 people to obtain what is available. But that's exactly why the number of entrepreneurs and number of innovators in rural areas is limited, because they have to go to 20 places. But the digital world makes it very easy to do so. And therefore, if you can make it available to them in their language and improve their navigation comfort substantially, then probably many more people will do this and access the technology and improve their livelihoods. I think these were the 4 or 5 research inferences which we drew from the exercise that we had done 3-4 years back. The points that have been made so far, and I'm going to hand it over to Osama ji, but before that, I'm going to request each one of the panel members to take a minute or two each to reflect on the kinds of points that everybody else has made and come back with they would like to add anything. And thereafter, we'll give it to Osama. So let's start with Purnima. Purnima, would you like to add anything to what you said, based on what others have said and based on what I said? Purnima?
Yes, sure. I think definitely this thing about the divide, language being a very important critical part in particularly for our country, both most of the people designing the technology are clearly the English speaking Anglophone group, and in a lot of the some of the things that I've seen happen when surveys are getting rolled out has been very serious, the need for serious focus of translation at that point itself, so that the insights that one is getting clearly reflects what is the regional reality. So some of the softer finer points are that your questionnaire itself, things like learning outcomes, the tools are typically central, but when you're capturing that at the regional level, you need to be very, very focused on some of that. So completely resonated with, those points. And one thing which I wanted to add was that about human-centric design, and where I feel that some things get missed out is that in the teams that are making or designing the technology, with the exception of cases where the person is somebody from the grassroots who's now thinking of problem solving, or it is someone who is coming in with that intrinsic empathy and makes it like a participative design process, typically it is somebody who's really very smart and wants to solve for it, gets a lot of good technocratic minds to kind of design something. It does get funded, it does get a lot of traction even in the development space. And then once things are designed, I see conversations where they're like, okay, but how do we make sure that, this has the right kind of outreach? Is there an NGO we can partner with? Can we bring in some civil society voice? So my thinking on this is that if at the design stage and or at the time when people are thinking of scaling, I think that people with experience, the real experience that Harish was also talking about, are extremely critical on such teams. And so at least in our own teams, the way I have seen that evolve is you do need to have a couple of people who understand the technology part, but you need to have people with deep civil society or practitioner or rural experience to be able to, bring that value when the design or rollout or scaling conversations are happening. You also need, of course, your econ, social scientist kind of team members. You need managerial skill sets, but valuing and giving importance to that practitioner experience and having those people on the teams, I think are something many organizations miss out on. It's not true for those represented on this panel, but I do see a lot of scale conversations missing out on that. So wanted to flag that.
Thank you, Purnima. Thank you. In fact, in the morning, Amarjit Sinha did say pro-poor public welfare programs at scale and with community connect. So this point he himself, Secretary Rural Development was making. Harish ji, would you like to make any comment in addition to your 2 excellent points about snobbery of not including a blacksmith as an expert and so on? Harish?
Sanjeev, sir, एक point था कि where, how do we create systems where we become part of their teams rather than they becoming part of our teams?
Right.
And And the secondly is we as a country had an incredible infrastructure that we have forgotten called the vocational schools, the ITIs. The question is, how do we revamp the ITIs as the centers of innovation and incubation rather than the IITs that Osama was talking about? Is in the sense that he was very right. I mean, wanted to ask him one thing: what is one innovation that has come out from the IITs? In fact, so even but the fact is, कि ITIs जो है vocational school, Germany succeeded because of ITIs. I mean, vocational schools. How do we Purnima's language of how do we put in failure monies in ITIs where they start creating their teams and then they consider us to be okay, are we important enough to be part of their teams or not? So can we reverse that structure? And that is where true innovation and true because they own the problem.
Right.
Who owns the problem? And they will own the solution. Thank you, sir.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Amol, would you like to say something?
Yeah, regarding say technology in healthcare, I like to say that people will not be a barrier. The healthcare provider will be a barrier because healthcare provider feel that it will not work unless until we believe that it will work. It will not go ahead. That's my only comment in case of.
Okay. Shiva.
Nothing from my side, sir.
Nothing from your side. So, Osamaji, now we have got a very rich contribution from everybody. And I, lazy man that I am, I hand over to you to kind of weave them together and provide your comments as well to build up the message from this panel. So, over to you, Osama.
Yeah, thankfully we are not doing a Sutradhar role in a, bifurcated Netflix movie. So thank you very much, and very powerful interventions have come. I would like to give few examples rather than taking each point from you, and they are actually related to your point which you found from the research, gender digital divide and language digital divide and so on and so forth, and bottom up innovation. And also, we work for the people rather than we say that we have brought the solution to the people and you have to adopt it. So I'll just give you one example. In our office, there is this Bablu guy who joined several years back as a sweeper. And one day the toilet was not working, and I asked him that you didn't clean. So he really became red and he said that, sir, I don't clean toilet. हमने कहा क्यों, ऐसा क्या गड़बड़ हो गया? तो बोला नहीं सर, हमारे यहाँ टॉयलेट पे हाथ नहीं लगाते। हमने कहा कोई बात नहीं है, तुम मत लगाओ, तुम मुझे झाड़ू और पोछा दे दो, मैं जरा साफ कर देता हूँ क्योंकि दिन में काफी लोग आएंगे। तो I cleaned the toilet, and he got so embarrassed that after that he forgot what was his caste, what was his background and everything. And gradually he found a place and a thing where he could apply his innovation. Today he is a wireless engineer. He does all the wireless training. He doesn't read and write yet, and he does all the last mile connectivity in office in rural India, does training, teaching and everything. He knows exactly kitna bandwidth kisko dena hai, kaise usko manage karna and things like that. And so this is one example which is again a little top down because it was from our office. We have about 1,000 women digital entrepreneurs in rural India who are not who are all the first time mobile users, who do not speak English, who do not even read and write Hindi properly, and they do each and every work through mobile and connectivity and access, including providing entitlement access, providing educational services, providing upskilling on digital, how to use UPIs, how to do financial inclusion, what are the 10 most important sites or the websites or the app related to agriculture information, what are the 10 most apps or the destination where you can consult a doctor online for preventive medicine. They also have the mechanism to create a small shop in their place where people come and ask for various kind of help and things like that. So and these are women. Now on the other hand, we have this large problem, especially after COVID, that we see there is almost 100% digital disparity. In Haryana, there is 100% digital disparity as far as the gender inclusion is concerned. Sanjeev sir ne kaha ke digital inclusion is very important for digital empowerment. But we are in a situation where digital dependency, digital necessity is putting people on digital exclusion rather than inclusion. पहले inclusion था which was aspirational, कि आपके पास अगर आ जाएगा तो थोड़ी लाइफ बेहतर हो जाएगी और अच्छा हो जाएगा and things like that. But अब अगर नहीं आया तो आपका बायोमेट्रिक काम नहीं करेगा, your access will not work. And there are so many things, now we are saying that कि बायोमेट्रिक काम नहीं करेगा तो राशन नहीं मिलेगा. We are also saying that कि online class कर लो, although we don't have infrastructure, digital infrastructure, and government is saying कि online class कर लो. So there is a lot of policy based, rule based dependency is being created on digital. E-governance has become totally digital, but e-governance services are not digital because the recipients are not digital. So हम कह रहे हैं कि access provide कर दिया है, लेकिन access नहीं है. Access is layered. एक पूरी जनरेशन है जो बफरिंग पे काम करती है, वो सिर्फ बफर करती रहती है. एक पूरी जो जनरेशन है वो उसको पेट्रियार्की के चक्कर में एक्सेस ही नहीं मिलता है. एक पूरी जो समाज है जो एजुकेशन ही ऑनलाइन नहीं कर सकती है. सो वी हैव लेयर्ड डिजिटल डिवाइड, लेयर्ड डिजिटल inclusion or dependency. So in what I'm actually trying to bring to the table is that very simply we can actually bring digital in our life. Because, and let me also tell you, I'm not treating digital as a technology. I'm treating digital as an access to information and knowledge which is necessary in our life to avail and express ourselves for rights, for opportunities, for human rights and everything. Even blacksmith का जो ये है, उसके लिए हमें कुछ knowledge चाहिए, कुछ information चाहिए जो हमको access से मिलेगा, जो access है नहीं. All those kind of things. And everything from health to agriculture to governance to livelihood, you see the barrier is not technology. Barrier is access to information. Barrier is actually that. And that is the most important part that we have forgotten. And therefore, I also say that digital is not a technology. Now it must be a culture, it must be a platform, it must be a language and a script. Thankfully, Sanjeev ji, एक और चीज ये भी हो रही है कि पिछले 5 साल में चेंज हो गया टेक्नोलॉजी. टेक्नोलॉजी इज नाउ ऑडियो विजुअल. टेक्नोलॉजी इज नाउ इटसेल्फ इज ए स्क्रिप्ट. दिस डिजिटल इटसेल्फ इज ए स्क्रिप्ट. अब हमारी सारी औरतें जो गांव में हैं, कोई किसी को लिखना पढ़ना नहीं आता है, लेकिन सारे ऑडियो मैसेजेस, इमोजीज, हाथ से लिख के उसका फोटो खींच के भेज देती हैं. मतलब दे आर सो गुड इन यूजिंग द वाया मीडिया ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी और डिजिटल to communicate what they are they are the best documentation resources. They document so well because they don't know how to read and write. उसको overcome करने के लिए they take photographs of everything. सारे को वीडियो में उतार लेते हैं, सारे को ऑडियो में उतार लेते हैं, सारी मैसेजिंग उनकी उस तरह से हो रही है. तो they have digital has become a sense of expression itself, via media to exercise many of those exercises. Now here comes, how do we actually create a policy where we say, hey, listen, digital literacy is not about knowing hardware and software. Digital literacy about knowing how these 5 apps, how to do online banking, how these 5 apps, to send a message, or how these 5 apps or the website, how to navigate to transact online or sell online or so on and so forth. तो the literacy, और जो ITI के इसीलिए रोल बहुत अच्छा बताया हरीश ने, कि ITI एक्चुअली यही अप्रोच लेके चलता है कि solution oriented approach of innovation and technology and curriculum and courses or whatever you call it. It doesn't say कि अंग्रेजी पढ़ो तुम. अरे तुम्हारी जिंदगी में कभी जरूरत नहीं है, तब भी अंग्रेजी पढ़ो. क्यों पढ़ो भाई? I mean, it's ITI approach is that, and I want to emphasize that ITI is not about institutionalization. ITI is about the approach. It helps you to solve your life problem using various kind of components which is available to, whether it's technology or innovation or items or products or services, anything. That's what it is.
Right.
And so I would like to just end there by saying that health is very important to our life, education is very important to our life, agriculture is very important to our life, and all these aspects, if you integrate the digital is just a medium and not a technology, and how it can be adapted to all these things to make our life better with a bottom-up approach is what all of us can actually help in various kind of policymakers or various kind of what they call as the scale people, you know, who always talk about scale, to tell them कि भाई approach बदल लो, scale अपने आप हो जाएगा.
Thank you, Osama ji. I would like to conclude by saying,
Sanjeev, there's a question.
Yeah.
So I just would like to pose the question. This is from the audience. They have come.
Right.
Actually, this session is very, very interesting. So we are getting a lot of very good feedback that I must tell you. You cannot
Right.
see on the other side, but it's gone into a very interesting discussion with all the experts talking.
Okay.
So
Okay.
there is a question from Shailaja Fennel, and I'm reading that out. It is good to hear this panel. I think the way forward would be to work from within the community and to understand their networks. This is the approach that I have undertaken in my research for the past decade. So now he comes to the question. I would like to take this opportunity to raise the question of why skilling, particularly vocational training, is seen as those for failed within quotes. This is a mindset that needs to be overhauled, and it needs to be recognized that where 70% of India is unemployed, he has written, but I think he means in the non-formal sector.
Right.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Harish and Osama, would you like to comment on that? Harish?
Ramaji,
Yeah.
Harish, go ahead.
I don't know. So, no, I mean, absolutely. I think we need to rework the word itself, skilling, because हमने एक hierarchy बना दी है, like the ITIs, etc., the RECs, NITs, and the IITs. Right. So, skilling, entrepreneurship, innovation, I think they're all in the same line rather than a hierarchy. And as long as we break that mold, it's not about failures. It's about creating those centers where aspirational. That those are all aspirational, and how do we change it? That's
right. Osama ji, would you like to comment?
I think the person who actually posed the question, he replied himself by saying ये सब उल्टा हो रहा है. I don't think we need to actually reply.
Right.
We need to work on that actually.
Yes, we need to work on that, and I think this panel has already addressed that issue very well. And I think the example that Mr. Harish took from Germany, they have resolved it. It's even in China, it is very prestigious to do skilling from ITIs, or getting a skill you are considered high up in the hierarchy. Here it is low in the hierarchy that you are.
संजीव सर, हम लोगों ने भी ये प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व किया है, हम रिकॉग्नाइज नहीं किए जा रहे हैं. दैट इज द प्रॉब्लम. हम लोगों ने तो खुद सॉल्व किया. ये गांव ऐसे ही थोड़ी चल रहे हैं. ये सब चल ही रहे हैं सेल्फ मेड ITIs पे. और उसे
थोड़ा सा पैट्रोनाइजिंग टोन में हम उसको जुगाड़ बोलते हैं. यही बात है.
I mean whatever.
So I would like to, anyway, I mean, we are running out of time now. I'm going to conclude only by saying that I think all of us talking about technology ought to seriously read a very perceptive book of Kentaro Toyama about geek heresy, where he says that technology by itself needs to be augmented by a good mind and a good heart in order for it to become useful to people. I think that is the message which has come through many different ways of putting by, all my esteemed panel members on this panel. So thank you a great deal, Purnima. Thank you, Harish ji. That was wonderful. Thank you, Siva. Thank you, Dr. Amol. And of course, Osama Sahab, I usurped your role as a moderator. So thank you for allowing me to do that. Okay. Good day and back to ISP. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Great seeing you, Purnima, Harish, and everybody else. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Great discussion.
Thank you, everyone. It was an excellent discussion that you saw on the role of technology and how technology needs to be adapted for rural India. I think we have to go much beyond English. because out of our population of 1.3 billion, only about less than 300 million speak English. So how can we deliver a lot of this training in Indian languages? I think those are some of the focus areas. And with further delay, I'll pass on for the next panel. There are a lot of interesting discussions happening. There are networking rooms. There are lounges. So I would request all of you to explore the platform to the full and enjoy all through. Thank you very much.